So when I first heard about Razor Pages and took a look at them, my first thought was this looks just like ASP.NET Web Forms in disguise. But as I started to use Razor Pages more and more over the past few months, really, um, I started thinking that maybe I misjudged them, and that maybe there was a little bit more to them, and they were a little bit more advanced, and potentially the right tool for a newer time. ASP.NET Web Forms has been around for, I want to say, at least 15 years at this point, and really came from a time when a lot of people were building desktop applications, and were first making their transition to the web. So it created an environment that was easy for uh, career desktop developers to make an easy transition to web applications. And I think it actually did a pretty good job about that. That's definitely open to interpretation, open to opinions, but being as even as a career web developer, with some desktop development thrown in, but I started on the web. Um, I think ASP.NET Web Forms did a pretty good job. Now, Razor Pages definitely takes a different approach, and we'll see that in just a minute here. But as I started getting into it, I started seeing some similarities and some differences. So I wanted to actually do a true head-to-head comparison. So this project that I'm going to do in this video is super simple. It's going to be one web form with one input. It's going to take an email address, and we're also going to use reCAPTCHA. Basically, the problem that we're dealing with is a Slack invite site, and for one reason or another, we can't use one of the ones that are already out there. Unfortunately, we're running into some technical challenges there. But basically, we had a lot of spam inputs, so we want to make sure that reCAPTCHA is part of this form. So it's one input, one CAPTCHA, click a button, submit it, and it'll send an email. That's it. Super simple. But this is a perfect example of something that both web forms and Razor Pages are perfect for, because it's one view, there's one action, one actual piece of business logic that happens. So I think it'll be a really good true head-to-head comparison between web forms and Razor Pages. Now, it's been a while since I did web forms, so we'll see how this goes. But basically what I'm going to do is start by putting together a ASP.NET Web Forms project, and of course that's going to be in .NET Framework, because ASP.NET Web Forms didn't make it into .NET Core. But we'll do that in .NET Framework, and then we'll switch over to a new, clean, pristine .NET Core project. We'll start with the Razor Pages template, and I'll probably pull across some code that is the same between the two. And then at the end we'll kind of compare similarities, differences, and then I'll share kind of what I learned. I do have about an hour right now, so this video is not an hour. I will speed through some of me coding, but I am going to keep my Visual Studio on the screen. I do have some secrets that I'll have in a secrets.json file, kind of off screen, and then I'll use them in the project via a super simple C# class. So you'll see that as I go through it. But all of the code will be on the screen, and yeah, I invite you to stick with it and watch as I go through this code, and we'll see what it's like at the end. Okay, so here we have a very simple page, and I'll probably go back and clean this up a little bit. I'll certainly make the final version that I post to the website a little prettier. But here we go. We have our text box to take an email. We have our reCAPTCHA, and I centered everything to make it look a little bit more like the existing page that we were using for a while. And then our join button. And it operates exactly like you'd expect. You enter your email address, say I am not a robot. reCAPTCHA does its thing. Click join. An invite has been sent to your email address. Oops, need to change that. Please check your spam folder if you do not see it. And my phone just buzzed. I felt that I just got the email. So with that, let's jump over to the code. Let's fix that. That won't take effect until the next time I restart the app, but that's okay. So basically, we have our ASP.NET Web Forms page. Nothing fancy going on here. Text box, a button, a label for errors, the reCAPTCHA stuff, and you can see I inject the reCAPTCHA site key in where it needs to go. Have a header, a little bit of styling to get reCAPTCHA to center. It didn't follow my styling here, so I had to do a little bit extra. And then when you click the button, it goes over to your standard, button click handler, and wrap everything in a try catch just so we can report friendly errors to the client. Use HTTP client to validate reCAPTCHA, pass the two things that it needs. If it's successful, status code success, and success comes back in the response body, then we send an email using SendGrid. This is basically just SendGrid's demo example. Nothing fancy there, but we pull the SendGrid API key from our secrets, invite link from the secrets, and create a little message here, send the email. If it's successful, we say that it was successful and to check your email. Otherwise, we say that there was an error, and we've got a little bit more error checking down here. So that's basically all there is to it. Oh, and secrets, basically we pull the secrets from the secrets.json file, which I have stored in my user directory, and it pulls out invite link, SendGrid key, reCAPTCHA site key, reCAPTCHA secret key. So now with that, I'm going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere, because coming up next is taking all of this and turning it into a Razor Pages app, and then we'll see how the two compare. So stick around, don't go anywhere. After a brief intermission, we'll be back with more code. All right, so have some new water, and let's get back into it. All right, so here we have our ASP.NET Web Forms app, and as I was thinking about this, as I went to get some water and take a quick break, I realized that I think a lot of this code I'm going to be able to end up just copying and pasting into the new project, just kind of in some different places. So I think that'll actually end up being a little bit better demonstration of the similarities and the differences between web forms and Razor Pages. So might be wrong, but let's try that and see what happens. So first, I am actually going to just open up a new instance of Visual Studio. So that I can have both of these open at the same time. So we'll create a new project, Razor Pages. Now right off the bat, we have our ASP.NET core ASP.NET web forms pages right in the root of the project here, but our Razor pages are in the pages folder. So they more or less correspond. I think this example has a contact instead of an error page, but more or less the same. So that's a little bit different, but I don't really care about these extra ones. I'm just going to leave them around just to keep the video a little bit shorter, but we'll actually, so there we go. Let's just run this. Alright, so it looks a little bit different. It's a little bit a cleaner look in my opinion. But let's start modifying. So we'll close that as well, and let's switch back to our ASP.NET Web Forms project. I'm going to copy all of this stuff. That's really the meat of what we were doing, and then I'll come back and grab this in just a second. So let's switch back. And now let's grab that other style and the script stuff. Put that there. Okay. So now, obviously all of this is just raw HTML. We don't have to change any of that. But this ASP text box stuff, run at server, obviously that's ASP.NET Web Forms. That doesn't work in a Razor page. So let's figure out what that really should be instead. So in HTML, in order to create a text box, we have a input type equals text. It does have an ID, but it doesn't really do quite the same thing as in web forms. So we'll leave that as an ID. We'll make it lowercase just for consistency with the rest of the HTML. But let's also use that as the name attribute. This will be useful when we post things back to the server. Right? Run at server has no place. Razor Forms page. Let's get rid of that. Obviously, this is different. For now, we'll just do that. And you can see it's highlighted. It detects this as Razor syntax. Obviously, secrets doesn't exist yet in our page, so it gives us an error there. But we'll get to that in a minute. Other than that, that div can stay exactly the same. Now, this button, we don't have on-click, we don't have pretty much any of this. So let's just remove this and turn this into a button type equals submit. And then I think the text was join. So let's do that. But if we're going to have a button of type submit, we probably want to have a form, right? Let's do form method equals post. If I leave out the action, it'll just post back to the same page. And that's actually what we want here. So that's fine. So let me remove that and let me put it in the right spot there. One of the nice things, I mean, it can be nice, sometimes it's kind of irritating if you're in the middle of something, but in this case it's kind of nice, is that as you copy and paste, Visual Studio will automatically reformat the Razor page for you. So that's kind of cool. And now these errors. In Razor pages, we have something called view data. We have actually both view bag and view data, I believe, still. So we'll use view data and we'll say errors. So that's pretty simple. Okay, so now let's do what in web forms it would be called the code behind. But in Razor, it's just this cshtml.cs file. Let's switch back here. Default.aspx.cs. I'm actually going to copy all of this and create an onPost method. Let's start by adding using, so that'll make it a little bit easier to figure out what we actually need to have coming from a different place than it does in web forms. So obviously we'll need to create secrets. Request we'll need to do something about. JObject should come from Newtonsoft JSON. So let's go ahead and install that from NuGet. Yep, find and install the latest version. Similarly with SendGrid, once this is done, we just need to install the NuGet package and then that should be good. Now we need to add it using for email address. It's also in the SendGrid package, but it's in a different namespace. All right, so now everything that we have left is secrets, request, and the text box and the errors label. So let's start with secrets. So secrets is going to be really simple. We're going to do exactly the same thing as we did in web forms. So let me just grab this. Copy this class. And we made it a property. It was a private secrets get equals secrets dot load. And we'll take the recommendation here and generate class secrets in new file. And of course it puts it in a non-helpful place. It puts it inside pages. So let's just move that up to the top. Yep. Move that up. Okay. Let's change this namespace. Paste the class. All of this should still work. Obviously we need to add some usings. So Newtonsoft JSON and system.io. And system. All right. No more red squigglies. Everything's green that's supposed to be green. Let's save that. Switch back to our cshtml.cs file. And that takes care of secrets. So all of that stuff is all gone. Now, one thing that we haven't quite gotten worked out is this right here. And this is going to be a little bit different in Razor Pages. So you'll notice the model is index model. And if you look at cshtml.cs, the name of the class isn't index, it's index model. Well, okay. So now we have this property secrets. Let's make it public. And now, instead of secrets.reCAPTCHA site key, we can do model.secrets.reCAPTCHA site key. And you'll notice that that secrets points to the property that we just made public. All right. So now let's figure out how we're going to do this guy. One of the nice things about Razor Pages is that it does do model binding kind of the same way that ASP.NET MVC and Web API does. So we can do something like, it's going to be a string, and we'll call it reCAPTCHA response. It actually turns out that it doesn't matter what we name it here because there isn't anything we could possibly name it where it would automatically get bound to this name because of the dashes. So I actually do need to help it out a little bit. We'll say from form, I believe it's name. Yeah, name equals, and I'm not going to retype that, I'm just going to cut and paste. Cut and paste. There we go. And now, instead of request G reCAPTCHA response, we can just say reCAPTCHA response. By the way, control space is fantastic. It'll either autocomplete what you're typing, or it'll pull up the little IntelliSense menu. It's a lifesaver when typing really long variable names. The only thing we need to deal with now is what were our controls in the ASP.NET Web Forms page. So this, let's just call it email address. Let's say we want a variable called email address. Except we actually did name it txt email address in the index.cshtml file. So name txt email address. This can get model bound, so let's just stick with that and say string txt email address. And then that syncs up, looks good. All right, now for this. For this part, remember we just said view data errors, right? So that's exactly what we're going to do here. So view data errors. View data errors. And that should pretty much be it. We're not doing anything fancy when we first load up the page, so we don't need anything in the onGet. This should be pretty straightforward. So let's try running it again and see what happens. Just in case, as soon as this loads up, I'll put a breakpoint right there. All right, so now it's loaded up, and it looks pretty much exactly like the web forms version. Obviously, a little bit of stylistic differences. I think this is using a newer version of Bootstrap. And it's also using the white theme of Bootstrap as opposed to the black theme. Um, minor differences, but we have the header, we have the input, we have the button, we have the reCAPTCHA. That's all good. So let's try typing in my email address, saying I'm not a robot. So far, reCAPTCHA looks good. Comes back successfully. Let's click this join button. It hit our breakpoint. See if we have something in reCAPTCHA response. We do. That's awesome. What about email address? Yep, that looks right. Okay, so now let's keep stepping through. There we go. That took a little bit longer than I expected, but it still came back. Is it successful? It is. And here we step through. Just keep stepping through. All of this should work just fine. Creating the email, sending it, status code, accepted. And we get the right message. We continue. And switch back to the page. An invite has been sent to your email address. Please check your spam folder if you do not see it. I did feel my phone buzz. And sure enough, here we go. Here is the message. So, pretty straightforward. Really not that much difference. As far as code layout is concerned, I would say. Right? So you still have the kind of the handling of the post. Is basically, instead of having a button handler, you have the on post. But that does mean that your index.cshtml is just plain HTML. There's no, fancy tags or anything crazy like that. This example didn't show it, but that also means that you can do more modern web things like using a JavaScript framework, Vue.js or Angular or React or Ember potentially. Does anyone still use Ember anymore? I'm not entirely sure. But one of those frameworks, you can use those. This is just HTML, JavaScript, nothing fancy. It just uses the @ sign to inject things into the page where you need to get access to the C# stuff. And then when you post, when the form posts, I'm trying to avoid using the term post back because that's very familiar to the ASP.NET Web Forms world. It just runs a function, and you can do whatever you want in there. And if you don't specify something else to do, you can specify an action result the same way you would from MVC or Web API. But if you don't do that, it just shows the same page again. So very similar in that respect to a web forms page. But I think it ends up being a little more powerful and a little cleaner almost. There are certainly more advanced things you can do with the model. So here, this whole class is the model, which is actually kind of nice. That's very similar to web forms. But you can also do things like binding complex objects to the entire form, for instance. Or if you're doing something more advanced with a grid or a table or some other more complex display with something like Vue.js or some sort of component framework. you can do that very easily with this because it's all just C# objects behind the scenes. It also supports dependency injection, which we didn't get into. This is a logger that's just injected via the same dependency injection engine that you'd use in MVC or Web API. We could have done that with these secrets. Instead, we just called the static load method that I created on the secrets class. Those could just as easily have been injected. Those could have actually been injected from the configuration infrastructure that's built into ASP.NET Core. But yeah, that's about it. I mean, I was actually kind of impressed at how quickly and easily I was able to copy everything over, and everything, pretty much worked on the first try. Once I got everything compiling, it did exactly what it was supposed to, fairly straightforward. Yeah. So let me know what you think in the comments. If you think you might get into Razor Pages and think it looks really cool, drop a comment below. Let me know. If you think ASP.NET Web Forms looks cool and maybe there are some things in that area that Razor Pages just doesn't account for. I think there's definitely a discussion to be had there. So leave a comment below, and maybe I'll revisit this video in the future with some of your thoughts, some of my thoughts as I continue to use both of these technologies. And yeah, let me know what you think. Definitely share this video. Drop a comment if you have thoughts. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, and click the bell icon to be notified when I release a new video. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next one.